Today's video is all about Manscaped. I get to talk about balls. No performance packages today. We're talking about the Ultra Smooth package. Ladies and gentlemen, it is summer, so if you want to talk about head-to-toe grooming solutions, you all know Manscaped's where it's at. Now, of course, this kit comes with a 3-step shaving system, all right? The engineers worked real hard for this one. Step 1's the crop exfoliator. You jump into the shower, apply that gentle liquid scrub, and you exfoliate. Then you've got the crop gel, clear gel, that'll prep your shaving area. And once you're prepped, you got step 3. You're gonna use the brand new crop shaver, a perfectly engineered groin shaver with 3 precision blades and extra wide lubricating strips, and you've got pivoting heads for the best shave at any angle. Then, of course, all these products are vegan, sulfate, paraben free, so you can never stop talking about it to all your friends and family. And of course, if you thought that was good, getting 5 replacement blades for your crop shaver as part of the package, you've also got the Boxer 2.0, because who doesn't need anti-chafing, high-performance boxer briefs that come in 6 colors for business and pleasure? Do you want to go conservative with the all-black pack? Do you want the black and gold waistband? Do you want to keep it classy with the pinstripe combo? The world is yours. And then, of course, you've also got the jewel pouch design as well, which keeps your family jewels safe, snug, and free of all forms of annoyances. Then, of course, if you ever wanted to get into the idea of the front fly opening, because, ladies and gentlemen, I want my bathroom breaks quick, then you've got the boxer briefs for you. Who knew that boxer briefs could have so much thought put into it? Leave it to Manscaped, huh? So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to have a smooth sack summer, then check out manscaped.com today. Get 20% off plus free international shipping when you use promo code SOG at checkout. That is 20% off, free shipping, SOG at manscaped.com, because if you're not going to thank yourself, your balls will thank you. Anyways, let's get on to the video. Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and we are getting closer to Bloodborne on PC. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the most coveted PC games in the world, I know a lot of y'all are excited for some Bloodborne, okay? I don't know when Sony's gonna, port it. I have no idea. It's gonna be forever locked on a PlayStation 4. Now, before we start this video off, there is a lot of clickbait in the world of PlayStation 4 emulators. Okay, I've covered these scams before.
The only way to actually play very recent PlayStation 4 games on the PC officially, without piracy or anything or emulators, is using PlayStation Now, which is the cloud streaming service. And personally, I don't think cloud gaming is a good enough service. It's not, good for gaming. It's good for TV shows, movies. For gaming, totally different story. But hey, that's just my opinion.
But hey, if that's your only option, feel free to go for it. You're not going to be able to play, something like God of War Ragnarok right now on a PC, okay? And you probably won't for a few years, ladies and gentlemen. So I wanted to look at Bloodborne and how close are we to the PlayStation 4 emulation today? Now, to understand, emulators all start from scratch somewhere, okay? That PlayStation 3 emulator I showed you that runs Metal Gear Solid 4, that used to be a black screen for years, okay? The emulator didn't even run proper games. Nowadays, you can play Metal Gear Solid 4, 60 frames, 4K. Doesn't even matter if Konami ports it anymore. We got it, okay? There's a lot of games that get locked onto hardware and just forever lost to time. No companies care, and it's thanks to emulation we're here. PlayStation 4 has a bunch of games that are actually locked to that specific system. Ghost of Tsushima, for instance. Bloodborne is where I can get at it. The Gravity Rush games. So again, this footage of Bloodborne that you're seeing is running on PlayStation 5, which is also, I guess in a way, emulated too. Because if you actually look into the PlayStation 4 emulators of today, there are actually a lot more than when I used to look at this a year ago. I actually made a video about this over a year ago where we looked at Spine, and I actually ran Sonic Mania. And that emulator could even run Persona 4 Golden, okay? Yeah, sure, you had to see it in wireframe mode, but no, Persona 4 Golden. Persona 5 Royale, Jesus, man. They make so many of those games, it's hard to keep track of. But to understand, if you look at this list over here, you might notice FPPS4, Obliteration, RPCSX, which is what I want to save for last. Spine, Kaiti, Orbital, GPS4, PS4 Delta, Shat PS4. And then, of course, you can see none of these are recommended because right now we're in the infancy phase. And honestly, 4 or 5 years from now, I would hope that eventually we'll be able to run some proper games on these. So today's video is mostly about where are we at in the infancy. This is sort of the beginning of these projects. You're on day 1, buckos, okay? Day negative 300. You are basically here when the whole journey has started. So when we look back at this 5 years from now, if I'm even alive, goddamn, then we're gonna have a good time because we'll actually be running Bloodborne on our PC, regardless of if Sony wants us to or not. So here you can see that in the start of it, none of these are recommended, some of these are active, and some of these aren't even actually free and open source, okay? They're actually closed off. So to start off with, I'm going to look at the one that we've already covered, Spine. Now, before we begin looking at this, I want to start talking about piracy, okay? I know there's a lot of emulator antis, okay, who like to obviously talk about, oh, Muda, are you endorsing piracy? No, there is no piracy over here. Every game that you're about to see has been backed up from my own physical media, and even the firmware BIOS files I have not downloaded from the internet. What I did was I took a hacked PlayStation 4. I've actually made a video on it a while back. I ran a mod onto it, and basically I connected it through FTP, and I downloaded the firmware files off of my PlayStation 4. Now, comparing it to the PS3 emulator, where you can just download a firmware file from Sony, put it into the emulator, and it'll do all the decryption installation for you. You can't really do that with the PS4, so for now, we're relegated to actually modding a PlayStation 4, ripping our own files off. Now, you could probably find a file floating around on the internet, but that is illegal. Don't do it. So, of course, there's a few options of firmwares to pick from, and the one that I got isn't necessarily compatible with every single game, but for our purposes, we can see some games running. So Spine, which I actually looked at a while ago, hasn't actually been updated at all. In fact, if you look at it, the last update was May 17, 2022, which actually might be a more recent version than last I looked at it. And this, of course, ladies and gentlemen, allows us to play some actual games on the PC. For instance, this footage of Sonic Mania that you're looking at right here, you might notice the colors are off, okay? Oh, Mood, are you playing somebody's recolor? No. This is the actual PS4 version of the game running underneath Linux on PC. See, emulation of PS4 is so interesting because it's kind of breaking all the traditional molds. To understand, the PS4 is an x86 64-based system, meaning that it shares the instruction set of most modern gaming systems. That doesn't mean that it becomes easily emulatable. Remember, the original Xbox was pretty much off-the-shelf PC parts. However, to this day, it's still a very complex system to emulate because A, not a lot of effort has been put into it in comparison to other emulators, and also, most people are already playing the games they want to on it anyways. But anyways, beyond all of it, this doesn't mean that it's an easily emulatable system. Now, the PlayStation 4 runs off of a Unix system, FreeBSD, Orbis OS is what they call it. And you might be wondering, well, why can't you install their operating system on a computer, even if you got the similar hardware to the PlayStation 4? Again, there's a lot of security checks and systems in place to prevent that from happening. If it was that easy, we would be playing Bloodborne at 144 frames years ago. It's not that simple. So for now, the ways that we're going to emulate is through virtual machines, basically the same way that I virtualize using a Type 0 hypervisor, bare metal, and then of course the other access is using a compatibility layer. So because this is a Unix-based system, Linux is actually quite popular for these emulators because what they do is they use a translation layer, which is kind of like how the Steam Deck runs Windows games. It uses something known as Proton, which translate Windows's calls to POSIX-compliant calls for Linux systems. So you can effectively translate a game on the fly. Now, this isn't perfect. Sometimes a call just won't exist underneath Linux, and that may cause the program to fault, show errors, or straight up crash on you. So one thing to understand is that's sort of the way that Spine is running Sonic Mania on PC. So because of a translation layer, I'm actually able to translate the Unix, the BSD versions of those calls to Linux and run the game that way. Now, sound works. The graphics, while they might be messed up, it's a pretty massive thing to see Sonic Mania running, even if it's actually even running at a faster speed. You might notice, damn, Muda, you suck at Sonic. Imagine playing Sonic at 400% fucking speed, okay? All right, don't get mad at me, get mad at the clock timings. Now, you might be like, but Muda, what if I don't have Linux? Well, shame on you! I'm kidding, this is a free and friendly channel. If you're using Windows, then you can use something known as WSL, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux. And surprisingly, this emulator actually works underneath Windows with the subsystem for Linux, which is effectively just a VM that allows you to run Linux underneath Windows. So if you don't want to install Linux, period, you can use WSL and achieve roughly the same effects. Again, I'm sure as these emulators develop, that might become an issue going forward, but for now, you don't have to switch to the Penguin yet, buckos, okay? You can keep Windows on your system. I personally don't agree with that, but hey, the world is a rich tapestry, you know? Now, the other option is FPPS4, which might actually be the better option for everyone right now. So, of course, ladies and gentlemen, it's been in development since 2021, December of, and it actually does not need that decrypted firmware to use. So if you have Windows, this is a Windows-based emulator.
That decrypted firmware part is actually incorrect. You do in fact need a special decrypted portion. You need like a specific library out of the firmware, which once you place into its required folder, the dependency clears in, and then you can actually use something known as Temmie's Launcher to better assist yourself while using this emulator if you don't want to command line your way through it. There is a bit of a asterisks here, just because the Temmie's Launcher actually gave me a Trojan warning on Windows. Again, I'm using this in a perfectly enclosed, virtualized environment, so I'm not worrying too much about it, but you be careful running things on your bare metal system. Might be a false positive. I personally did not check this. Anyways, then you can actually decrypt a lot of your PlayStation packaged games, and in some cases, Sonic Mania works literally perfectly. It actually registers a lower frame rate than what I was getting with Spine. However, the graphics load in just fine. The music seems to load in just fine. And this is the one emulator where I also noticed that, yeah, you can actually connect Xbox controllers to the emulator so you can actually get proper gamepad support. Now, beyond just Sonic Mania that you're seeing right over here, I also ran Valhalla, Cyberpunk bartending waifu simulator, and that seems to work just fine too. Again, you can kind of see the correlation when games are a little bit more simpler. Yeah, this emulator, also has a pretty good compatibility list for now, just starting off. I believe somewhere around 70 games are playable, and of course, a whole lot of the more complex games aren't. For instance, Bloodborne doesn't go past this one call in the actual emulator. It doesn't even reach loading, period. And I don't think it's going to be like that, again, for a few years. So yeah, FPPS4 works really well for Windows users right now. In fact, at the moment, this might actually be the best emulator for anybody wanting to emulate games right now.
What about Obliteration, Muda? This one comes for Windows, Linux, and Macintosh users.
Obliteration is, again, a Windows-only emulator, and this one actually makes the entire aspect of digging out your firmware files pretty easy. It's got a setup process where you identify which folder you want to put the file system, your games folder, and then it connects through FTP to your PlayStation 4 in order to download firmware files. And I think a lot of this is simply due to the developers putting in a cheeky anti-piracy check, so it kind of forces everyone who doesn't have a PlayStation 4 jailbroken, to kick dirt, because basically you would have to have a jailbroken PlayStation 4 so you can download your own firmware files off of it. But again, it can run I guess one test application. Other than that, it's not meant for running games yet. Again, very early emulator. They actually have to get the bare bones skeleton to work properly before you can even think of emulating full-on game files.
Now the other one is Kaiti, which again is a Windows exclusive emulator, right? And this one has actually been updated since August 18, 2022. It's on version 0.2.0. Again, another early emulator. Nothing here is truly intended to run modern games, but this one's actually quite interesting. Beyond just running some PlayStation 4 games, you can actually run PS5 Homebrew on this system, meaning that right now, you too can emulate PlayStation 5. right now on PS4 emulators. And this kind of resembles sort of like how Dolphin does it, where that used to be a GameCube emulator, but it also runs the Wii, from what I understand, due to them both having very similar architectures. Now again, are you expected to run PS5 games anytime soon? Brother, everyone's focused on PS4 first, okay? Let's not blow our loads yet. The PS5 is also a significantly more complex system that's going to be a lot tougher to get nailed down. So PS4 first. But again, it's cool to see some PlayStation 5 software running on actual PC. Again, even if it's just homebrew nonsense. Now, Orbital is the actual interesting one. It's one of the first PlayStation emulators, and unfortunately, it seems like development isn't really working on it so far because it's really just made by one person. And this one is the only one that I've ever seen that actually loads the safe mode version of the PlayStation 4's operating system. Now, this runs off of a low-level, a hypervisor, an emulator, not an emulator, but a virtual machine. And for now, while it can't run any games, it does resemble and actually launches portions of the PlayStation 4's operating system. And again, while being the very first one by Alex Altea, I don't actually think this is going to go anywhere simply because it's one developer working on it. Again, I think a lot of the effort is going to go towards the project we'll see at the very end. Now, ladies and gentlemen, GPCS4, which you've probably seen as a scam name somewhere, is actually the furthest emulator that I've seen in development. This one has the latest build that you could download from June 6, 2022, version 0.2.1. And here you can see an actual game running on it, and you might be like, wow, that runs at 2 frames a second. Dog, it is the beginning of emulation, okay? There used to be that we couldn't run Red Dead Redemption on PC. Now you can run it 4K 60 and play multiplayer with the boys, okay? So everything starts from zero. So RPCSX, for those of you who don't know, is developed by the same people behind RPCS3, that amazing emulator that I've been simping for the last year. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, they decided to, put on a new hat and develop a PS4 emulator for the PC. Now, of course, this one is Linux only. And the reason why it's Linux only is, I don't know, ask these guys, okay? It probably will be Linux only to begin with. Now, this being said, like I showed you earlier, you can run this underneath Windows through the Windows subsystem for Linux. But for now, I'm just going to keep to using Linux and running this right now. So, of course, for the RPCSX team, it's not possible to run any games yet, and there's no ETA for when this will change. Simply because, again, they want to actually have the emulator up and running and doing its very basic things before you can even imagine running software, let alone full-on commercial games through it. Again, you got a hello world before you can shoot off to the moon. So going on to the RPCSX Discord, it's rather interesting because literally a week ago, there only used to be like 2 things in the roadmap, and now they've already got a bunch of different things that they're covering too. For instance, TSC calibration, guest instruction patchers, kernel memories, they're going after everything. And this is basically a group of talented developers working literally for free, by the way. Again, this is some very talented development work that they're doing just for the sake of preservation and making sure that those PS4 dreams stay alive forever. So this emulator doesn't have a GUI. You pretty much have to operate it within the command line, which is pretty much standard for most of these emulators. Again, as they're developing, it's going to be like this for a while, until of course a team gets together and designs a GUI that makes it generally accessible for the average person. Again, that's really only going to be a thing when the emulator is far enough in maturity that it can actually run some games, to start off with, like a batch of games, like properly. So of course, running this emulator once, it's actually wild that even as the developer said that it's not designed to be running games, it actually can launch a game. One of them is We Are Doomed. Now, We Are Doomed is a game that you've probably seen launched on other emulators for PlayStation 4, and that's because it's considerably simple, and also, there's just something about this game that seems to run relatively well for most emulators. Again, you don't get far beyond just like maybe half loading the title screen, but it's still very impressive work for an emulator so early in its development. Now, what happens if you take any of these emulators and load up Bloodborne? Nothing, okay? They all seem to crash, and they crash because Bloodborne is obviously not going to be running for the next couple years. Of course, again, like I said in the beginning, if you want to play Bloodborne on the PC, you're gonna want to use cloud streaming solutions or buy an old PS4, okay? For now, until Sony decides to port Bloodborne, which may be next week, which maybe next month you'll get the news. Maybe never, okay? Remember, I used to think Metal Gear Solid 4 was going to be ported, but it never happened. That game is still locked away. I'm sure Konami could announce it for the Metal Gear Master Collection Volume 2, but until then, literally it's up to the community to be preserving these games. Now, Bloodborne is a very important game to me. I love it. It's one of my favorite Soulsborne games out there. It's that or Elden Ring, and it's a shame that it's a game that's forever, it seems, locked to the PlayStation 4. Sony or From Software don't even care about upporting it or like patching it for the PS5, where we can get 60 frames a second. So for now, it's really going to be up to these emulator teams to mature this somewhere down the road. And I'm sure probably by the year 2023, 2024, we may one day be playing these PS4 games like Ghost of Tsushima, like Bloodborne, eventually on a PC. And it's not just about playing it on the PC, it is about preserving the title on the PC. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a wild world to go down into, and while I'm sure this video may have been dry, technical, and unfortunately I'm sure somebody probably clicked on this video expecting to see Bloodborne footage on PC, it's sadly not going to be a thing. But where the exciting part is looking at all of this stuff from the very beginning, from ground zero. Because I'm telling you right now, 4 or 5 years from now, some of your favorite YouTubers are going to be covering these emulators, these same projects, and they're going to be able to play some of their amazing PS4 titles on the PC through these pieces of software. So for now, while you may not be that excited looking at the command line and these things failing to load up even the most basic of homebrew software, I guarantee you 4 or 5 years from now, these talented guys and gals working behind on these projects are going to make one of Sony's strongest consoles ever preserved for gaming public going on forward. Again, it's really up to the community to preserve these games for time forever. It's kind of a shame because I recently read a report where like 87% of games were just not preserved properly. But thankfully, due to emulation and due to us storing our ISO files and backing them up, these titles shall forever be saved for future to come. And again, if I look at other emulators too that excite me, emulators like the PS Vita emulator, the Vita has some good games. And thank God for Vita 3K, where we can actually at least preserve games like Gravity Rush. But of course, games like Gravity Rush 2 that are PS4 exclusive, we're going to have to wait until these systems like mature. Until then, we're going to be sitting over here waiting with bated breath until times finally update and we can actually play some of these games up on the PC and maybe, hopefully maybe, actually run these games at 60 frames a second. 4K, 8K, maybe even inject some ray tracing into them. I don't know how that's going to happen, but hopefully soon. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video because anytime I get to talk about emulators, boy oh boy, that is what I live for. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and yeah, I'm out.